welcome to everybody. In this session we have 3 different lectures. We will take questions and remarks on each one of the lectures. So the first lecture will be Amos Israel, and the subject is Jewish Law and Social Cognition, Research Paradigm.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Yitzchak. Thank you to my colleagues on the panel. I want today to talk about, to continue my efforts of utilizing the law and in Jewish law, focusing today on social psychology and especially social cognition. So let's think about the classic debate regarding external influence on Jewish law. Tashma and Katz, in their famous controversy, researched the question by and through text and focused on sociological, historical, and institutional aspects of this question. In the JLA studies, I argued that the importance of systemic analysis and process analysis is really important to put these multiple aspects together. But there I ended with the observation that at the end, all this process of textual analysis and decision-making takes place in the human mind. So, halakha develops in the minds of individuals, in dynamics between multiple minds of poskim, and through the minds of the many who create customs, who then influence Jewish law. So, in a sense, an alternative arises. As we can research cognitive processes directly, why not do that in Jewish law? So let's go back and try to think about this in a more basic way. Jurisprudence requires the integrations of many acts, including sequences of acts, all enacted on a huge amount of varied data, options, traditions, and considerations. So we have a lot of things, and each one of these parts is a whole network of a lot of data interconnected with each other, and a posek has to take all this and use it to come to a moment of decision and then formulating a decision. So in a sense, law on one side and reality on the other side are each of them very complex. And together they create a complexity. Add to that social context, institutions, processes, and the things get even more chaotic. So, in a recent, if what I say is that this huge amount of data goes into the black box of the human cognition, and somehow there comes an output, or most of the times we get an output. And another way to look at the question of legal research in general and Jewish legal research is to say not what is the outcome or the input, but what happens actually in the mind of poskim when they do this action. So there are 2 ways to do this. One way, I try to do this through the analysis of text, published in a volume edited by Aviv, who deserves a lot of credit on the work he does on the philosophy of halakha. There I try to show how you can take a responsa and try to get like a window into the process of what's going in the human mind and get a snapshot of it, or a kind of freeze of one kind of process that does this analysis. Today, I want to try to say, well, let's go one step further and think about this as a sub-paradigm of Jewish law, another way to do Jewish law. So, here I become really obnoxious or whatever. So this is a very simple chart trying to say all the facts, the Weltanschauung, the ideology. One of these books is all the text of Jewish law, one of these books, that precedes the decision. Then you have all the things after the decision. Where will it be published? What are my goals? Which audiences are influenced? Who will read me? Whatever. And then we have the situational factors. Am I tired? Did I eat breakfast? Whatever. Who is present? Who asked the question? Whatever. And in the center of this all is a feedback loop of the decision and the formulation of the arguments supporting it. And it's important that it's a feedback loop, because I'm not sure what precedes the other. And it comes, it works, feedback. So I argue that these are not external parts, but most of this is actually present in the human brain at the moment of decision as part of, if you want to reduce it, as neural messages going on in the brain, or what I more do is the cognitive mechanisms active in the human brain in really tough decisions. And if that is true, then if we can get an insight about how these decisions are taking place, that should be added to our other ways of researching Jewish law. More importantly, what I will argue at the end of this lecture, that says that external factors are never external. To the extent that they happen inside the cognitive process, they're internal. And it has to do with legitimacy of external factors, etc. Okay. So how does this get into the process? Now, this morning we talked about the difference between knowing all the texts and looking them up in Google. So we would say, so a posek goes through all the texts that are relevant, chooses the ones, organizes them, and then does a formal decision taking place. But that would never happen, because it's so many sources, so many considerations, so many processes, and it is not a correct depiction, a representation of what happens in the human mind. That's not how it works. What really happens, like Daniel Kahneman taught us, is that we have quick, intuitive mechanisms that help us converge these data towards a decision. So let's see some of these mechanisms. So we have one kind of mechanism that assesses similarities between options or sources. We have actual functions in the brain that can take two cues and say they're like each other or not like each other. So I can choose out of 5 sugyot the one that represents the 5 sugyot, because the 5 are alike. That saves me a lot of effort. Or we have mechanisms that are in charge of aggregating, of integrating signals, both from close sources and from far sources, from similar sources and separate ones. In order to do that, we have each data bit has a weight to it, has associations to it that help connect it and help it converge. This should influence more, this is inhibitory, this is exciting other associations. Weights like the Oraita or the Rabbanan. The weight is different in the process, so it will influence more or less on other processes. Many times these things converge, okay, so there is feedback loops that help us to converse it. This is actually taken from a legal research, thinking about how the tragedy of the commons happens in this decision process taking of agents in the producing of tragedy of the commons, and we could apply that to different sugyot, as I hope to do in the essay I'm writing on it. So one insight, when multiple conflicting chaos does not converge, we get yirat hora'ah. I don't know what to do with this balagan. When they converge in semi-automatic processes, we call that siyata d'shmaya. We call it lasuke shmata aliba de hilchata. The wanting of getting to the hilchata asuks the shmata. It takes from the shmata what we need, from the shmata and from the reality, and it converges it towards the halacha. So just to show that I'm not talking in the air, here you have brain imaging of hubs and structures in the brain that helps us converge data and connect them to each other. And here you have a beautiful depiction of long and short pathways in the brain, actual imaging that can show us the way in which data that is far from each other and close from each other converge to each other. Of course, this is very representational and not exact. It waits for somebody to get up and do it. And that will be the invitation at the end. So I don't suggest to reduce Jewish law to brain research. Should be done, but not only. We can employ cognitive methods and textual analysis that is directed towards understanding the cognitive process. I'll give us a few examples in order to get to my finish, because I'll get another note in a few seconds, is what are the consequences on established legal questions in Jewish law. So I'll give two examples, one with a few caveats. The first, that was the previous one. Okay, so this is the first insight. In any given decision, facts, sorts, considerations, associations, the way people think is set. A posek comes into a decision with all his experience, thinking, whatever, done. The amount that you can change the way, the cognitive way of thinking is built in the process itself is very limited. The only thing you can do is activate existing associations and influence the system. But you can't change the matrix. That is one very important insight, although changes happen. So in the human mind, there's not all the sources and you can organize them. We have like kind of source sheets in our mind. And when a problem is presented to me, it's clear to me that I have a picture of all the relevant sources with their interconnections that jump out and say, this is the way to think about it, out of hundreds of sources and considerations. Second, a posek legal training and practical experience shape his mind. So Roshei Yeshivot, if we'll put a Rosh Yeshiva and a posek into fMRI and let him think about the same question, I hope I'm correct, we will see a different picture. Or academia and a posek. More convergent thinking and more divergent thinking, or different kind of parallel process, and etc. Second is how much shimush talmidei chachamim, apprenticeship, is important in learning psika, because that creates the associations, the training about how to think about the problem, and that is one of the things that differentiate between Rosh Yeshivot and whatever. So that is one. Second argument is that let's think about external pragmatic considerations and formalistic considerations. Can we talk about normativity and pragmatism in Jewish law in the decision in the mind? And my argument is that because the mind is very complex and it is a matrix, at some point, so one input is pragmatic and one input is formal, but sometime along the process, as it develops, the neurons or the cognitive mechanisms don't differentiate. At the moment of decision, it's not that I have pragmatic and normative. They already interacted in very various, multiple ways, and the decision is inherently complex. There are very few important decisions that are purely formal, formalistic, normative, or purely formal, pragmatic. Mostly pragmatic things by external coercion. If the king says you should decide that, then I say yes, that is the decision, but that doesn't enter halacha. That has no continuous life for halacha because it's not internal. It's not in part of the complex process. So the posek will write something in the tshuva that will hint us this is not part of a legitimate external influence. I'm finishing. So I argue for the creation of research groups, multidisciplinary, and maybe even research labs added to Jewish law. I'm trying to argue for embracing available technique and maybe develop exciting new ones. Think about going on the internet and try to see how people use Project Shoot of Bar-Ilan and do a data analysis, how we search for information, and if we get the tshuvot later to see what the relation is between the searching and whatever. And what I think is that Jewish law can and should be at the forefront of research of legal complexities, of mixed jurisdictions, of legal pluralism, of legal adaptation and religious conservatism and extremism, of the impact of multiple identities and membership, of the similarities and differences between religious and non-religious legal system, jurists, institutions, and constituencies. These are all things that Jewish law, that we can contribute to the fields of sociology, legal research, and Jewish studies. Aside from invigorating Jewish legal research, the proposed approach urges to forego simplification and analyze and present the complexity of Jewish law, legal events, and the experience of humanity as they really are. Thus, we could enjoy and portray the full splendor of Jewish law and the richness of human minds and human beings. Thank you.